Let's start with trinomials, where your leading coefficient is equal to 1. And let's look at some of the patterns you might see when trying to factor these. The first pattern is where your second and third term are both positive, and it will factor into two binomials that look like this. Well, let's use u and v as our variables here. So you'll have x plus u times x plus v. If your second term is negative and your third term is positive, it'll factor into two binomials that look like this, where u and v are both negative. If your second term is positive and your third term is negative, or your second term is negative and your third term is positive, so if your third term is positive, either u or v will be negative, and one of them will be positive, so you'll have x minus u times x plus v. So you'll have one positive and one negative. In this case, you'll have two negatives, and in this case, you will have two positives. Now, let's go on to some examples so you can figure out how to find u and v. Our first example is x squared plus 4x minus 32. So we are looking for two numbers that added together will equal 4 and multiplied together will equal 32 or negative 32. So let's find those by factoring negative 32. Our first two factors will be 1 and 32, 2, 16, 4, and 8. We'll see here if we make the 4 negative to equal negative 32, 8 minus 4 is equal to 4. So these are our u and v, and we can write it as x minus 4 times x plus 8. Our next example, x squared minus 7x plus 6. So we need two factors that multiply to equal 6 and add to equal negative 7. So let's factor 6. Well, we see this is negative, so we know both numbers are going to be negative. So let's start with negative 1, negative 6. Well, there we go. Negative 6 plus negative 1 is equal to negative 7. So our answer is going to be x minus 1 times x minus 6. Next example, x squared plus 7x plus 10. So, like before, we need to factor this and find two factors that add to equal our b value here. So 10 factors into 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Well, 2 and 5, and neither of them is going to be negative because we have no negative values here. So we're going to have x plus 2 and x plus 5. Our final example, we're going to have x squared minus 12x minus 28. So we need to factor 28, or negative 28. So negative 28 is 1, 28, 2, 14, 2 minus 14 would equal negative 12. So those are our u and v values. So we have x plus 2 times x minus 14. Let's look at situations where your leading coefficient is not equal to 1. So your first step is going to be to multiply a times c. Then you're going to factor it, like we did before, looking for two factors that add to b. And we'll call them u and v. And u plus v should be equal to b. Then we're going to split. Now this is where it differs from when you have a leading coefficient of 1. You're going to rewrite your equation as ax squared plus, but then you're going to split b into u and v. So you're going to have ux plus vx, and then plus c. And then you're going to factor by grouping. And I'll show you how to do that with an example. So we have 12x squared plus 5x minus 2. So we need to multiply a and c, and so we would get negative 24. If we factor that, we can have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. 3 and 8 can't equal 5 if we make the 3 negative here. So here are u and v. So now we split it. So we will have 12x squared minus 3x plus 8x minus 2. Hold on, let me swap these. So we would have plus 8x minus 3x. So to factor by grouping, you group the two terms like this, well, not multiplying them, just grouping them. So to factor by grouping, you group the two terms together. So you group these two terms and these two terms. And so you would get, and then you look for the greatest common factor between those two terms. So the greatest common factor between these two terms is 4x. So we would take out a 4x and multiply the 4x. So 12x squared divided by 4x is 3x, and then 8x divided by 4x is 2. So we would have 3x plus 2. And if we factor a negative 1 out of these two terms, then we would also get 3x plus 2. And so if we reverse distribution, we would get 3x plus 2, and then we'd be left with 4x minus 1. And there's our answer.